Hello, Catherine.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm so glad to have you back here on our Badass Women of the Lifestyle interview series. This is your second time because you are double badass.
What I really wish I was in Canada with you preparing for an awesome, sexy house party. That's what I really wish.
Yeah, that's coming up in a few days. I wish you were here too.
Mm,
One of these times you'll come.
yes, indeed. And maybe come after I
I will do my best.
come.
So, we wanted to have a conversation about the erotic blueprint. And it's interesting that you were the one who brought this up, not realizing that Liam and I had just done a podcast fairly recently about personality types. And we had talked about the Enneagram first and then the erotic blueprint second in that podcast. So if listeners want to go back and hear what Liam and I had to say, they can check out the episode called Personality Types. But we're going to take a deeper dive today because we used the erotic blueprint as a way to kind of get into talking about pleasure at our last women's retreat. And it sparked some new interest in the topic for you. So, why don't you tell me why you suggested this topic
Yes,
today?
I'm pretty sure I was sitting in like a really boring high school kid pickup line and I was Marco Poloing you to make it a lot more fun. And I was like, we have to do a podcast about this because I had been introduced to Erotic Blueprint years and years ago. And I took the free one, whatever. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But I didn't really put it into personal practice or my professional practice, other than just this is cool. Check it out. It gives you something to talk to your partner about. But after we did that this spring for the ladies retreat, I took it again, and hearing hearing the women talk about it at the retreat and you could see their wheels start to turn and see them conceptualizing it and see them talking through ideas with each other. And I even had an experience with someone there who identified as an energetic, and I was like, oh, I think that's what I am. I'd actually forgotten what I was, and I hadn't taken it before the retreat because we were busy doing other prep things. And we were able to have this wonderful energetic exchange because we had this language around what it meant to be energetic. And it blew my mind because it made me realize how often I had missed out on some energetic sexual connections because maybe I wasn't super physically attracted to someone, or they didn't meet my usual criteria of this or that. It created this nuance, and it got me really excited personally. So I've been enjoying doing that personally and learning more. But then since the retreat, I've had the pleasure of having some of the women reach out to do coaching, either on their own or even a couple of them with their partners, which is fun to meet the partner that they were talking about at the retreat, and to see the ways that they have incorporated that learning into their own pleasure seeking, their pleasure seeking with their partners learning how to do it. It's been so fascinating. And I thought we need to get on here and talk about this from that point of view. And also because we're starting to prep for this fall for the women's retreat. And so I just thought it would be fun to come and talk about this with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Liam and I learned about it, I think back in 2020 at the PCAP event that we met at, or was that 2021?
20.
Anyway,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, and so Tori and Soul of the Torrid Soul podcast, they did a presentation on it. And that was when we first became aware of it. And like you, we took the test. We even took the paid one. So we know our, kind of percentages. And it was interesting, but we didn't really integrate it fully into our lives until I guess it's been the past year when, we've been starting to kind of struggle with our libidos and looking for solutions and answers. And so we've brought it back into more regular conversation, and it's been really fruitful for us. So we're going to get into some of the details of how it's changed our approach to sexuality within ourselves and between us and our partners and our extended partners in the world of non-monogamy. But first, for those who are not familiar yet with the erotic blueprint, let me just give a very quick introduction and outline of the 5 types. Jaiya is a somatic sexologist who came up with this framework. And it's basically like love languages but for pleasure. So everybody's heard of the 5 love languages for relationships, and it's pretty ubiquitous in the world of self-help and couples counseling. But this is like that, but more for sex and pleasure. So it might even be more relevant for our conversations in non-monogamy spaces, where you're dealing with people more on a sexual level than you are on a love and relationship level often. So I'm just going to go through and do a quick definition of each type turn-ons and their shadow sides, just so our audience can maybe identify themselves. If you're interested in this, you can take the quiz online, and I will put the link to that in our show notes. But it's also one of those things that you can very easily self-identify with.
I would highly recommend, and I always, when I present this to my clients, I'm like, listen, it's like $18 each. It is so worth the money to do the paid one because of the printout that they give you. And it's this 25-page, not all words. There's lots of beautiful eye candy mixed in. But the information that they give you is so thought-provoking. It can create so many conversations. And I love that they break out the percentages. So I very much encourage people to do it. I will say this. I had a client write me back and say, are you sure about this website? It looks a little scammy. I'm a little nervous about putting my credit card. So I always give that disclaimer. It is a little bit 1999. The website, it could use a little fluffing. But my credit card's been in there now for like 4 months. I think we're good. So push on, pay the $18. Well worth it.
I would also say it's probably worth it if you've done the test in the past, as I did, but you feel like you've evolved sexually, to do it again, because these things can change as you get into different things and you break through certain barriers. So I would actually be interested in paying to do it a second time 5 years later.
Yeah. Well, and also if you have new sexual partners or a new primary partner, or if you're going through perimenopause, or you've, struggled with any prostate issues as a man, anything that shifts and changes, you are now empty nesters. I mean, transition, I think, you probably have your base, but it may even be that you have the same results, but you're able to look at it with fresh eyes because something has changed.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So here are the 5 types. The first is energetic. So the energetic is someone who is really into anticipation. They love the tease and the longing, and they are even capable of having touchless orgasms. So they like a long build up. They can go for very long sexual sessions. Tantra, I think, works well for energetics. But their shadow side is that they can shut down if things move too quickly. So if their partner goes straight to the genitals or gets into a sexual space more quickly than they're ready for, it can just shut the whole system down. I've also find with my energetic friends that they can get overly sensitive very quickly. So if they've just had an orgasm, they need some downtime to kind of breathe it out.
I also be overwhelmed even just with with other people's energy. So, like if there's group play or something like that, the ability to feel that energy of other people can be leveraged for all sorts of fun, but it also can easily overwhelm us. If there's too much energy, or there's like some static with somebody else's energy, we can get really distracted by that.
Right. And they tend to like lighter touches. If you want to do more intense touches, you have to be very slow in the build up toward those. It's my understanding. But I am like very small percentage energetic. So it's the type I am least in touch with and therefore most fascinated by.
Which is great because that's my number one. So look at us balancing.
Gotta figure each other out. So the second type is sensual, and that's my primary type. The sensual is very much into using all 5 senses. So the eyes, I need to have the lights right. The ears, I need to have the sounds right. If it's not on the right kind of music, if the playlist is off, it's so distracting. The smells need to be good. Like, give me some nice, massage oil or scented candles, but not too strongly scented. So sensuals love a wide variety of sensation and touch. So hot and cold play, impact play that doesn't necessarily go for pain, but just for sensation. It helps us to get into our body. We can have non-genital orgasms. So like those, all those little bend points in your body, like your elbows and the back of your knee and your neck and like between my toes. Oh my God, it's so good. Like, why don't people lick there more? Um, so I've never had an orgasm from that, but it feels fantastic. And apparently some sensuals can orgasm from that kind of touch. The shadow side to a sensual is that they can get in their heads. This is very me, and be easily distracted and a little bit judgmental. So if I come into the room and Liam and I have said that we're going to have sex that night, if he's just lying on the bed with no music and the overhead lights on, I immediately get angry. Like, not just, this is not a sexual space. I'm like, what the fuck? Do you want to have sex or not? Like,
Come
this is
on,
not it.
woo me.
I know, like, do the work. So my judgmental side can come up quickly if I feel like, that pile of laundry over there has got to go before I can get into a sexual headspace. So that's not always awesome.
Mhm.
The sexual is kind of the most traditional relationship with sex. So a sexual likes nudity and genitals, porn. They are really driven by orgasm. They can get aroused very quickly, which is great. And they're probably very well tuned for like the expectations of the lifestyle. Like they can walk into a room, see some sexy stuff, have a little touching, and then ready to go. So that sounds great. But the shadow side is that they can feel a little bit impatient with other forms of pleasure or foreplay. And therefore, they and their partners miss out on all of the yummy things that happen between, meeting and actually having genital interaction. And also, if something doesn't work for them, so if they have erectile dysfunction or performance anxiety in a lifestyle situation, it can feel devastating. Like they don't think that there's any other way in to having a sexual experience. So that can be a difficult thing for them to deal with. The next type is kinky. And the kinky person loves the taboo or whatever feels naughty to them. So there can be a psychological kinky type where they're more into what's happening in their mind. So the fantasies, role play, domination and submission, all of that kind of intellectual, psychological taboo play. Or they could be more on the physical side of kink, where they like the impact and ropes and bondage and all of that kind of physical taboo. Their shadow side is shame about their desires. So this one, seems kind of obvious. If you like weird shit, you might feel a little weird about that.
Right,
so,
right.
so this is what Liam is. He is like, he's very high kinky. And for him, it's all the psychological. Anything that's naughty or bad really turns him on. Kinky is a high second for me as well. So it's interesting. Jaiya talks about pleasure stacking. And so if you know your first and second and even third types, it can be this kind of like hierarchy of needs where you've got to make sure, like in my case, as a sensual first, there must be the lights and the music and the setting must be right first. But once those needs are satisfied, then I can get into my kinky self where I love to be dominated. I love to be tied down. I love to be blindfolded. And so once you understand, your kind of order of operations for pleasure, you can get there a little bit faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was also going to say that in one of the podcasts I listened to with Jaiya, I think remember she said it or the person she was interviewing, but the definition that I heard of kinky is being turned on by, like you say, anything that's taboo. This woman was like, which makes me so thankful that I was raised Catholic because everything's bad and naughty. So I get turned on by so many things. Thank you, Catholic Church. I thought that was so funny. And then it also reminded me of, I did want to add a shadow side for the sexual is, so I'll say that my partner, his number one is sexual. And his shadow with this is he can have some shame about being sexual because he so badly doesn't want to be like a toxic, stereotypical dude. And so it's almost like he'll have shame about how quickly he could be turned on by something sexual because he feels like that's basic. So
Right.
he can struggle with that side of the shadow, which I'd never thought of until I was with somebody that explained that to me.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Well, and I've seen in my relationship how that taboo or that naughty can also cause problems relationally, because for Liam, it was very delicious to be having these secret little text messages with someone else. And as soon as I know about it, or as soon as I'm part of the conversation, it loses some of its interest for him. So that can present some real relational difficulties.
Yeah, sure.
The final one is the shapeshifter. And so this is the person who can kind of speak all of the languages. They want all the things, and they are often just kind of led by whatever their partner's desire is, because if someone comes at them with kinky energy, they can go with that. Or if someone wants to have a more energetic experience with them, they can live into that as well. So they have this voracious appetite for all different kinds of pleasure. And their shadow side is that they tend to be pleasers who often don't get fed themselves. So they spend so much of their time in a sexual space doing what their partner wants that they don't always get what they want or even know what they want themselves.
Right. Absolutely that. And then when you say, what do you want? Or if the partner wants them to initiate, it can be kind of this freeze like, well, I do all of it. I want all of it, but I don't know which one of it because I haven't had to think of it on my own. So it can create a freeze response if they are being asked to initiate or it's up to them. I've seen that happen.
Right. So one of the things I am interested in talking about and thinking about is, where do these personality types come from? So I'm interested in the Enneagram and attachment styles and this, and where's the originating point of these preferences, or the way we move through the world. So as a therapist who's probably more qualified to guess about this, what would you guess is the origination of our blueprints?
Well, you used a great word, qualified to guess. Exactly. We're throwing noodles against the wall here. But, I think that, for instance, I studied Myers-Briggs and Carl Jung's archetypes a lot. And his original thought is that we sort of come into the world, when the Myers-Briggs world, we come in with our personality not exactly set, but pretty natural. Like there's a lot of nature in it, even before nurture. And then certain things are certainly nurtured. And then, say in our childhood, we have a pretty decent expression, at least for Myers-Briggs assessment. And then his idea is as we grow, and like the work of a conscious being is to actually move on that spectrum. So if you are very naturally extroverted, if you're quote doing your work and really digging in and learning yourself and staying open and curious, that you actually will become more introverted as you get older. Or if you tend to rely a lot on feeling, as you mature, you might start to work on that thinking side as a way to make decisions. And so I think when we're talking about assessments that aren't sexual in nature, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, things like that, I think that those probably have more of a nature component than I would guess the erotic blueprint one does, because we're not coming into our eroticism, our turn on, sexual hormones until later. And there's so much. I mean, with regular personality assessments, certainly depending on your culture, like if you're super extroverted in our Western culture, very championed. If you're very extroverted, and maybe I would guess the Japanese culture, maybe not so championed, right? And so certainly that nature piece, what's appropriate in your family, what's appropriate for your gender, or the least ones you're identifying with, what's appropriate for your religion, what's appropriate for your work stuff, all of that, of course, is going to be that nurture. So I would guess that the erotic blueprint piece is probably more nurture than nature. And especially because sexuality is so charged and religion has so much to say about it. And our culture has so much to say about it. And our gender roles have so much to say about it. And then certainly having any sort of trauma or abuse in the sexual arena could, I would think, affect that as well. That's absolutely me just speaking off the cuff. I have not looked into this, but that's what I would guess.
Yeah, I would say probably the same thing. A lot like the Enneagram, those early experiences you have that either affirm or dissuade you from acting a certain way. they kind of reinforce each other, right? So, um, I am a perfectionist, and that was reinforced by my parents and my teachers in my world. And so it makes sense to me when I read about the sensual that I need to have the space looking right and feeling right and tidy. And that I get kind of frustrated and judgmental if it's not that way. So, this is not separate from who you are. This is just, one way of defining, all of those traits that we carry around with us into every interaction.
Right. And you're an
Um,
Enneagram 1, correct?
yes.
Where that perfectionism is coming from. Yes. And so I'm an Enneagram 2, which is the helper. And so also not super surprising that I would be an energetic, because I feel like my superpower is to be able to be energetically connected with people, to kind of hear under the words they're saying, feel that energy. The shadow side of that is I'm definitely an empath. And so I've had to learn how to not feel everyone's feelings for them. Sometimes even just walking into a coffee shop, I'll be overwhelmed by it. So having a little more of a barrier, but then especially the people I'm intimately aligned with, or have some kind of co-regulation system with our nervous systems, I have to be really careful to not get swept up in their feelings and lose who I am and where I am. So that the Enneagram and erotic blueprint definitely have some lineup for me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the fact that kinky is a close second for me probably has some relation to my religious upbringing, right? The
Mhm.
fact that the taboo is very powerful. And, one of my most powerful fantasies is consensual non consent.
Mhm.
Because, as a kid, sex was bad, but I really wanted to have sex. So if someone made me have sex against my will, then that was kind of almost okay, right? So,
Yeah.
it's kind of playing with those early fears and desires. And I heard Jaiya say something interesting on a podcast today. She said that ideally we would all be shapeshifters, that we would all be fluent in all of these methods of access to pleasure, but that it's the blocks that keep us from accessing different types. So I was thinking the one I'm least in touch with is energetic, which seems to me to be the most relational and connected and vulnerable. And so maybe I'm not in touch with that, part of my sexuality because that feels a little bit scary for me. I feel if people see me too deeply, they won't ultimately like me. And so to open up in that way feels a little dangerous.
Mm.
And so maybe that's why the energetic is the hardest one for me to get in touch with.
Interesting. So I really thought that I would be a shapeshifter, and I still think that I've got a lot of that shape-shifting energy. But I would say the one that I scored lowest on was sexual, which surprised me because I do have a really high sex drive and I really enjoy sex. But just as you were saying that, I was like, oh, I could make a case for, because I'm so energetic and intimacy into me see, whether it's intellectual, emotional, with clients, with friends, with my partners, that is I have such a high value to that, to have that deeper level of connection, that maybe it's a little bit of like snobbery of like, I'm not just going to rub my parts together. That's not enough. Like I could see that I could have a little resistance to that. I mean, even, and I'll share a little bit more about this story later, but when I watch people have sex in at a club or in a group setting or something, it's almost like I'm an anthropologist or I'm at a museum. Enjoy it. I'm not shaming it. It's more like, whoa, her pussy's a different color than mine. Whoa, that's an interesting position. And it's almost cerebral. It's like fascinating, but it doesn't necessarily, have a direct line to getting me turned on. And so maybe there's a little bit of that. My undergrad was in health promotion and public health. And my internship was at a athletic center in DC. It was actually to support all the White House staff. And I love working out and I love teaching people about it and motivating them about it. But I snobbed myself out of that work because I was like, it isn't enough for me to get you excited about having bigger biceps. I want to talk about what you were telling me about your marriage while we were doing bicep curls. Right. So again, I could see maybe that it didn't feel like, quote, enough, if it was just the physical.
Right. Which is kind of what your partner is struggling with a little too, right? That's what he's drawn to, but socially he doesn't want to be that guy. And so
Mhm.
we're all, there's this push and pull, I guess.
Yes, which also reminds me, and I've talked about this before, the how many men either assume that they're sexual or maybe even test as sexual as their number one, but with a little more digging. I'll always say, like you said, this is certainly, you could do some self diagnosis, quote, if you will. But any of the personality assessments, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, I think Blueprint, even if you take the official assessment, it really isn't official until you self-validate, because depending on what mood you're in, if you just had a fight, where you are in the house, what you have on, how long it's been since you've been to a sexy party, the way you answer these questions could really vary. And so if, as you read about it and you explore, if you're like, I scored as sexual, but I'm not so sure that that's that. And I've heard so many men have that experience when they self-validate, being like, yeah, definitely I'm sexual, but that's not the end of the story. And so I think that that often happens for men. I mean, number one, their genitals are on the outside. So it is very much an outward visual experience, right? And if porn was the first thing they're introduced to, porn is definitely made for the sexuals, unless you find some really great niche porn that gets to the other ones, right? And so I think there's just kind of this assumption that that's how they're supposed to be as men. Is that's their entry into the erotic.
Yeah. When Liam did this, he was 0% sexual. And for the first, I don't know, 12 years in the lifestyle, he was casting all about for different erectile dysfunction remedies, trying to figure out why his dick wasn't working. And then, we figured this out. And he's like, oh, I wonder if maybe that has anything to do with it. That in these swinger spaces that we find ourselves often, it's very sexually driven. It's very like script based, like first you kiss and then you have oral sex and then you fuck. And it just was not working for him at all. And to have this revealed that he doesn't mind having sex, but there's a path to get there that is just not part of the standard swinger script in most spaces.
Mm-hmm.
That explained a lot for both of us.
Mm-hmm. Luckily, he is such a creative and persistent and patient person. Of all the people to have that, to have 0% sexual and be a swinger, like he would, of course, be able to. I'll find a way around it in a really creative and artistic and beautiful way.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk a bit about some of the specifics of how we have used this in our own lives. So, how has this framework helped you understand yourself or your own sexuality, Catherine?
It really helped to answer. Well, so first of all, I didn't have a lot of questions. This is funny. It's like I didn't realize that I had questions about how I did things until I looked back. And it was like it felt like I got explanations for questions I never thought to ask, is one way to put it. And so one of the explanations that became very clear is why I love to flirt, why I love anticipation, why I love planning, why I love being teased, why I love erotica, like the slow build, where I have my imagination to create it. Like I can watch porn and enjoy it, but I would much rather read about it and have that slow build up. So that made a lot of sense to me. And it also, for a while, I was in a monogamous stage of my relationship while I was going and being in swinger situations and at events and things. And I kept saying this to my partner, like, I'm having a great time. I'm out flirting, I'm dancing, I'm keeping my physical boundary, which is what he was asking for, but I was still having a great time. And I think he just thought I was full of shit or telling him what he wanted to hear. And even the trip that you and I went to, and that we were both at Hito, I came back saying, I'm actually glad that I had sexual boundaries that I had chosen to keep, because I really enjoyed the connections that I made. And there were some connections that were so strong. Now I can use the words energetically, that because we were naked and at Hito, we would have just fucked. And I don't think it would have been as fulfilling. And so that was kind of cool to realize that having this sexual quote restriction that I agreed to, it actually it helped me lean into that energetic and why it really truly was okay. And I was having a great time even without. I mean, I will say I was real tired of my vibrator by the end of the week, but I still had a great time with all those energetic exchanges.
Right. Well, I think that's a good point to make, that even though you're an energetic first and maybe the sexual is very low, that doesn't mean you don't want to have sex. It's just like you have a certain path you want to take to get to sex. I would say I've kind of had the same realization that for a long time, we were very focused on how many times a week do we have sex, because Liam is a scorekeeper, right? He's got the spreadsheet. And so we were doing it because that's what you're supposed to do. And 5 times a week was our like goal number. So we'd have, 20-minute sex, and it was great. It wasn't great. It was okay. It was okay. We came, it was fine.
Right.
But then we started having these 3-hour sex dates, and realizing that you can't actually have penetrative sex for 3 hours because, ouch, right? So then what else do you do? How do you fill this time? And we were finding such an expansiveness in those 3 hours, so many different ways to find pleasure, um, that I was like, oh, this is what I've been missing. Like, I don't need to penetrate all that much. I need all of this buildup. I need all of this touch. I need all of this setup of the space and the lights. And like, I need conscious connection in this way, and not just like, okay, we got to do it because it's the end of the month and our numbers are down. Right. So, so it showed me that, less is more, maybe, or quality over quantity is really what feeds both of us and both of our blueprints. And we were just like, you know to continue the penetration thing, we were trying to put this square peg in this round hole, and both of us were doing it but not loving it. And now that we have words to, to describe what it is we want and why, it's made our sex life more fulfilling. And I maybe have jumped ahead to the next question, which is, how have you used it with your partner? But I guess, yeah, how it's helped me explain myself to myself is to not, beat myself up for not being into it or having my interest wane in sex, and realize, no, it's not that I'm losing something. It's actually that I've gained something. I've gained a deeper understanding of what I want and what feels good. And it's not that thing that everyone tells me I'm supposed to want. So it's not that we're, falling apart in our relationship. We're actually like moving up to something bigger and better.
Or something that's more fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So how I've used it with my partner, it's helped me understand how exciting it is for me to inject energy into our relationship. And we've been laughing that sometimes we've been recently going to parties, and sometimes we'll take play off the table with other people. And it's really fun to go and we'll say, let's be sexual energy vampires. So we go to when people are like, oh, we just like the sexy vibe. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm going to suck the life out of your vibe. Like we just will go. And it's like, when we put our mind to that, when I was saying, like, sometimes I need a shield when I go into a coffee shop, it's like, okay, like, open all the holes so that all that energy can come in and froth us up, and we can like talk about what's hot, or this makes me want to do this to you. And so then we get that build up, and then we can go home, and we've gathered all of this energy from other people that we can then froth up for ourselves, which is really fun. It also helped with, as we talked about the sexual and the energetic, my partner's number 2, which is pretty close to his number 1, is energetic. And it helped me understand why our sex felt different to me than any other sex I'd ever had, because it has such a strong energetic line to it. And it was hard to quantify or explain until I had this language. And then the ability, as you're saying, to talk about it in a way that externalized our differences so it didn't sound so personal. For instance, if I was trying to get him all turned on, I would touch anywhere and everywhere except for his dick to like build that up. And he'd grab my hand and be like, like touch it immediately, even if it wasn't hard yet. And I was like, well, you're missing all this other fun. Well, he didn't necessarily find that fun, the tease and the lead up. And he needed to like for him to be sexual and then energetic, like he needed to get into sexual to access his energetic. Mm-hmm. Right. And then I would get frustrated because he would go straight to touch my pussy. And I'm like, ow, or like, she's not ready yet. Yeah. Like go visit all the other places. She's the last room. But it was hard for me to say that without it sounding critical, but it gave so much information and explanation without it having to sound critical or personal. So that's helped a lot.
Yeah, I had an experience of this the last time Liam and I had one of our 3-hour sex dates, where he went in the first 5 minutes straight down to eating my pussy. And I was lying there just feeling like, why is this happening right now? Why am I not into this? And so I was able to kind of pause and say, why are you doing that right now? Is that because it's what you want to do? Or because you think that's what I want you to do? Or is it because you think that's what we're supposed to do? And what I know about your erotic blueprint is that going straight to the pussy, getting straight into the sexual is not actually your best path to fulfillment. And it's not mine either. So could we do something different right now that would be better for both of us? And so, he's very shame averse. He's very quick to go into shame, and I'm, critical. But to be able to take that little step back and say, I know this about your blueprint, and I know this about my blueprint. And I'm just wondering, why are we ignoring both of our blueprints right now? Makes it a little easier to hear than, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Like, let's just think critically about what's happening and why, and maybe correct course a little bit.
Yeah, right. And I think that having some of this language, I love that you said correct the course. When we have this language, I think it makes it easier to do small course corrections. Like I'll say something like, now that we have this, if he, goes down toward my pussy, I'll be like, she wants to be teased more, or she's not ready yet. And we've got this language that I can say that without it being like, oh, and the whole thing is over, So.
Yeah. It's not that you're a bad lover. It's that, you got to speak my language. Right? Exactly. I can't understand you right now.
Exactly. Translate. Yeah.
Okay. So here's a juicier question. How have you used this in the lifestyle?
So this is when it really hit me that there was something to all of this blueprint stuff. So we went to so this is a partner that I'd been monogamous with, and we were just starting to explore, lifestyle stuff together. And so we went to a club in Brooklyn, and it's a really neat club. It's called Hacienda. And Hacienda is this cocktail lounge that's kind of sex positive, E&M friendly. It's an actual bar. There's no sex on site, that sort of thing. And so we went there, and it was just fun, and people are walking around in lingerie, and there was, just this great vibe that was getting us both, pretty excited. And then we met some people, and they were like, hey, do you want to, there's this little back door here that we can go through the alley and go to a different building, and there's some spicier stuff happening. And we're kind of like, when in Rome, right? And then I was like, well, which kind of spicy stuff? And so I asked, and they said, there are going to be people having sex. And my partner had never seen people have sex live. And he has some sexual shame stuff that he's been working on, not like trauma, just again, some of that shame about like, is it okay for me to like this? Is it okay for me to want this? So I was like, are you sure you want to do this? He's like, yes. So I was being empathetic, being being energetic, worrying, is he going to be skeezed out? Is this going to be overwhelming? Is this going to be too much? And he's smiling, we walk in, there's a bed with all these beautiful people having sex. And I kept looking to see if he was okay. And then one time I looked, and my butt brushed up against, and he had a boner. And I was like, wait a minute, do you think this is hot? And he looked at me like I had three heads, like, who wouldn't think this is hot, Catherine? And I'm like, oh, the anthropologist who was, looking at the color of her pussy in that interesting position. Because I wasn't turned on yet. I was just fascinated and interested in seeing his response. And he's like, of course, this is fucking hot. And I was like, interesting. So then I rubbed my butt a little bit more on him. And I mean, it didn't take like 30 seconds and I was fully there with him. So he got into the sexual space. And then as soon as I got connected to him energetically, then I could energy vampire him and get into that sexual space. And it was so hot. We had so much fun and we both surprised ourselves at how much we liked it, how much we ended up, voyeuring and exhibitioning. And it was a blast, but it was so cool to leverage those things of those differences to have such a fun and exciting experience.
Mm. Have you ever gotten to use this with someone who is not your partner?
Yes. Again, being able to have an experience with a woman that was energetic. And I don't think we had a terribly strong sexual connection or like attraction, but we were both really intrigued by each other. And we had this lovely, hot, energetic exchange that wasn't very sexually driven or outcomed. And it was completely fulfilling. And I'd never had an experience like that before. And then we also, recently we went to a hotel takeover that had playrooms and stuff. And we met this quad and neither one of us were terribly like sexually attracted to these people, but we just loved them. They were fun and we had great talks. We all ended up doing this big massage thing and it was definitely hot. We went back, had great sex. And then we ended up talking to them later that night in the dance floor. And we were like, so we're not really playing with other people, but we had a lot of fun with you guys. Would you guys want to like have a makeout sesh parallel play situation? So we all went into a playroom. We all made out. We set our boundaries really clearly, just kissing and touching. And then all the people that already had sex with each other, but there was no cross. Mm-hmm. And it was so hot. And we both walked away and we're like completely satisfied with the situation. And again, it was not just going and sucking the vibes energetically. Like we got to have some energetic exchange that was also sexual, but didn't have to be PIV or oral sex or anything that was very traditionally sexually driven. So that was very fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been able to use this in all kinds of fun ways, especially as an event organizer. So the first time I used it was like 3.5 years ago. I had 8 people over for New Year's Eve. So I had them all take the blueprint quiz and share their results in our Telegram chat leading up to the event. So because it was a small group, we could, around the table on New Year's Eve, as the private chef was serving our dinner, we were talking about, what the erotic blueprint has revealed to us about ourselves and each other. And then once the play started, we could, be very cognizant of, oh, I remember that this person is a whatever, and play with that and play to that. And it was very sexy. So now I've incorporated it in almost every event I do. So the women's retreat, I had them all do the quiz before and then set up, 3 different play spaces that all had a slightly different feel to them. So me as the sensual, I'm like, what kind of music would a kinky like? What kind of lighting would an energetic like? So
I will say, you all, she is so good at this. I have all 3 of the playlists that she planned for the 3 different stories of our pleasure party. I have all of those on my phone and I do use them to get into different moods and energies. You're so good at that.
There you go. Yeah, different playlists. At our most recent Sapio tour in Portugal, on the first night that we had been together, I guess it was the second night of the trip. So we had been together for a day. I felt like people were starting to want to have some sort of play, but I also felt like it was maybe a little too early in the week for like full on playroom. So just on the spur of the moment, I said, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to set up this playroom, but in this space, there will be no sexual penetration. And if you're feeling led in that direction, you can go to your rooms. Everyone's got their own private play spaces. But here in this space, it's just going to be sensual touch and all the different ways we can get to pleasure that don't involve penetration. And I did that sensual eating thing to get us started that we did at the women's retreat. And it was so sexy and such a good way to get this group interacting in ways that were non-threatening to the new people, because there were a lot of new people. There were also several people on our trip who were soft swap only. So it allowed them a little more scope for play where I think people who are soft swap only often feel like full swap people don't want to play with us because they can't go all the way. So those people had opportunities. And there were two men on the trip who were sexual who both came to me later and said, that was so good for me because I so often go straight to sex in these settings. And I was able to have experiences that I wouldn't normally have. So thank you for putting that restriction on me.
Absolutely. And when you say again that restriction, that reminds me of that trip to Hito. And I also was working with a client this week, and she came to me because she's like, I have this boundary where I really just don't want to have penetrative sex with another man. And I feel like that's going to hold us back in the lifestyle. Like, of course, it works well if it's a threesome or whatever, but and she just kept seeing it as a liability. Mm-hmm. And this person had taken the erotic blueprint, and I said, well, so let's think about this from erotic blueprint point of view. You are looking at this as a quote liability or a restriction from a sexual point of like probably from the sexual blueprint. And I said, but let's think about, so she's energetic and shapeshifter, I think are her highest ones. And so I was like, let's think about how you could, because she was kind of like, what's our elevator pitch, or how do we explain this without it sounding like I'm just this big wet blanket and it's my triggers or my boundaries that's holding us all back. I mean, she had so many ways to deprecate herself with this boundary that she had. And I'm like, okay, let's flip this script. Let's look at, from an energetic and from a shapeshifter, what you bring to a situation that some of these couples would never have thought of, have no idea that you can bring. And I want you to like explain to me what makes you a great lover because of that. And so she's like, okay. And she just, and she said all of these things. And I'm like, okay, like I'm your coach. You got to stop. Like I'm getting turned on just listening to you like that. And she was like, oh my God. And you could see all of a sudden what she'd always thought was a restriction, that she was the wet blanket. I was like, you're going to be such an asset to these situations because there's just the pure creative, how you need to be creative if there is a certain sexual act that isn't on the table. Well, we're going to still figure out how to be pleasurable. That's how we are. That's how us swinger people are. We'll find a way, and you're going to get more creative. It was so fun to help her switch that.
Well, and you're going to blow these people's minds if all they've ever had is the swinger script, right? If you suddenly, whip out some, I don't know, some cool massage or sensory things and have a whole sensory play thing with them, they're just going to be like, what just happened? That was amazing.
Yes. Yes. Well, I'll give you one more personal experience that just recently I used. So I was thinking about this, like you say, from the typical, like kind of swinger script. It was a new situation for me to watch my partner penetrate another woman. And I was having some nerves about it from some old traumas and stuff. And I was a little bit nervous about it. And they were nervous. He and this woman were nervous about if I was okay with it. And I was like, I went erotic blueprint, and I'm like, how would this be energetically pleasurable for me? Like, I'm fully satisfied on all the body parts sexually stuff, but like if energetic's my blueprint, let's go on let's play to my strengths. And so I was thinking about the nuance of like what would be hot about it, because there are definitely things about it that turned me on, and then there are things I got nervous about. So I went with that energetic of what would turn me on. And what I came up with is I loved the idea of saying like, okay, go be with her, and then grab her energy and get so turned on, and then come and take it out on me. So I'm going to watch you get super like swirled up and like frothed up with her. And we all agreed that I kind of got to be the like, now, I kind of got to be the bratty boss about it. But that's what it was like. Okay, so go get that energy. And now I get it. And it was off the charts hot. I didn't feel triggered at all. I felt like supported. They both loved it and got super into it. So this was a situation that if I was looking at purely from body parts or sexual, probably wouldn't have been that pleasurable. I probably would have been like, oh, I better do it so that I'm not a wet blanket. And instead I went energetic, and it was amazing.
Awesome.
That was fun.
Well, and for our party coming up in a few days, we've had all 36 people coming to the party take the quiz, and we are going to have colored bracelets that everyone puts on their first and maybe their second blueprint, because you can't remember 36 people's different styles. And so then I've encouraged people to kind of play with that. So maybe you want to seek out someone who has the same type as you and kind of use that as a shortcut to pleasure. Or maybe you want to seek out someone who is the most different from you. And this is what I have done in the past, where I go to an energetic and say, I don't understand energetics. Please show me what you like. Like, do it on my body. I'm going to practice on your body. I just want to learn. I want to do new things. Mm-hmm. And that's been so fun. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to see how this plays out in a large group party. And yeah, maybe I'll report back later.
Please, but like at least a social media post. Like we're all going to be like our popcorn is going to be popped, ready, wishing we could see it in person, but at least give the report afterwards about how the bracelets worked. And that would be so interesting. And also even to hear if you could capture any of the experiences of like those two sexuals on the Portugal tour saying this was so helpful for me, because it would be really cool to hear how knowing that information, what it challenged them to do, what they learned. That would be so fun. And then I'll also, just wanted to mention that with, you have been so wonderful to help lead one of the peer groups that we started this summer. So Expansive Connection, we started these peer-led, peer-facilitated groups, and we've got men's groups and women's groups. And from your group, there are a few of my clients that are in your group, and they've been like, wow, it was so cool to take this erotic blueprint and have a discussion about how to access my pleasure and do this in this group. And it's so fun to go explore with our partners and then be able to come back every 2 weeks and report and give each other ideas. So that's been another fun way that we've used it, kind of like, I guess, professionally in the lifestyle. That's been a neat thing.
Yeah. Well, in that group, they gave a few topics they wanted to talk about. And one of them was consent. Another one was how to make the transition into sexual play. And I thought, okay, those are good things to talk about. But before we get to that, we have to know what we want, because before you can ask for consent, you have to know what you're asking for. And before you respond to a request for consent, you have to know what you're comfortable with and what works for you. So you've got to know this first before you get into any kind of talk about consent and transitions, because otherwise it's going to be a not very satisfying experience if you just go along with it. And, most of us do that for most of our lives, and just kind of go with the script and do what we're told. And, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't awesome.
Right.
And so it's been fun to talk to that group of women.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to ask you to put your coach and therapist hat back on for a minute. And think about if you had a person, a woman especially, who came to you with some sort of blocks to pleasure. So maybe it's a history of trauma, maybe it's feeling sexually disconnected from their partner. How would you advise her or them as a couple to use this blueprint as a tool to reconnect both with her own sexuality and with her partner?
Mm-hmm. Well, as you said, first of all, no, it's hard to crave sex that you're not enjoying. It's hard to get excited about sex that you're not over the moon about. I mean, it's hard to prioritize sex if it isn't fulfilling. And so that piece about knowing what you want, knowing what brings you pleasure, is such an important first step to enhancing your sexual connection with your partner. And so that would be I think using that to at least have a starting point of, I love how Jaiya talks about with the erotic blueprint. It's almost like, I think I've heard her describe it as each one is like a different house. And so the first thing you do is you really learn your own house. And so, as an energetic, again, never thinking about it that way, I've had so much fun exploring all the rooms of my house, and also exploring the deep dark corners where, maybe some shadowy shit has grown, right? And making sure that you know your own house, the lights are bright, there's no mold, everything's like in good working condition in your own house. And then from that, the security of knowing that and the confidence that you get, just like I was talking about with that client, like the way she was able to turn that liability in her mind into a benefit, that's going to exude confidence for her, which for one thing is going to be totally hot for other people to like. She's going to be very attractive, and she's more likely to experience pleasure because she's confident. And so with that confidence in herself, most of the time when we're feeling secure and confident, we are more likely to get curious about what are they doing in that house over there. So then we could walk into the sexual house, if you will, and especially if our partner is, if that's theirs, they can walk us through the sexual house that they live in and teach us that one. So again, the idea isn't like, oh, I'm an energetic, so I'm just staying here. It's explore it and then go and learn those other houses. And then, as I said, using it as a tool to be able to externalize the differences so that differences don't feel like a personal attack. It gives us a common vernacular. I think that is super helpful. And then I always love to think about the Venn diagram of, if you're an energetic and you're a sexual, like what are the things, where do those overlap? Let's start there and let's really like, let's play to that strength. Let's harness that. And then with that comfort and confidence built, we look into each other's and be like, I'm kind of interested in what that is. I'm interested in what this is. Let's see how we can make those two things, what special cocktail we can make for our own sex with that. So much like any of the personality assessments, it starts rich discussion and it depersonalizes. Those are the big things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you're listening and loving this conversation and you'd like to talk more about the erotic blueprints and different ways to access your pleasure, you can join me and Catherine. We are going to do another women's pleasure focused retreat, and the erotic blueprint is a big part of that for us. And we are going to be in the Smoky Mountains, October 9th to the 12th. We still have both private king suites and queen bunk spots available. So if you go to sapiotours.com and click on the Women's Fall Retreat tab, you can enroll for that weekend right there on the website. And we would love to continue this conversation with you.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say one of the pieces of feedback I got from one of the women that joined us in April and is now a client is that it was such a safe space to explore erotic blueprint, talk about it, understand it without the pressure. I had one woman who is not bisexual at all, and she was like, to be able to talk about this and explore this and have really open conversations with people that I'm not going to be sexual with because it's women and I'm straight, there was this comfort. She was like, if it would have been cool if it was a couples retreat, but just knowing that there were men in the room that may be attracted to me or maybe I was attracted to them, she's like, I wouldn't have been able to absorb it or really like settle in with safety to understand it. And then another woman who is bisexual was like, it was so similar. Like it was so cool to explore this with other women. And because there was a sexual charge for her, but she was like, but not having the distraction of what my husband was thinking or what other men that I was potentially just, attracted to. So they both really loved exploring this in the context of a women's retreat. And you're so great about setting those scenes. And I think between you doing those scene settings and you're so good with logistics, and then I bring all that like energetic and helping them be energetic and talking through it. It was such a beautiful recipe. And even though it's a work weekend for me, I am so personally excited for it. It was just a blast. So I can't wait. And I hope we get the whole house filled with wonderful women that are ready to support each other and support themselves in their growth and exploration.
Yeah. And I like that you brought up that there were women there who were not bisexual, because the question I get more than anything else is, if I'm not bisexual, will this be uncomfortable for me? And my answer is always that pleasure is not just about sex. Pleasure can be about touch. It can be about space. It can be about connection in platonic ways. And so I want to just encourage women who are feeling nervous about, I don't know if I'm ready to go down on someone else's pussy. That is not required. That is
Absolutely.
not the only way to experience pleasure. You can have a very pleasurable experience in a platonic way in this setting with other women who are just exploring sensation, exploring, this kind of emotional expansiveness of what can pleasure be beyond the traditional expectation. So,
Absolutely.
please come. We would love to have you.
Yes, it would be great.
Is there anything you'd like to plug, Catherine?
Well, just again, thank you for being part of our peer facilitated group. We've gotten great feedback. We're going to open those back up in December and January for men and women. It's been such a pleasure to supervise the facilitators and to hear the impact that you all are having, and then to hear my clients, the men and women that are in the group, and hear what they're getting out of it. It feels like beautiful ripple effect of people helping each other. We do have a couples retreat coming up in the mountains of Georgia. Kelsey and I will be leading, and that will be focusing on couples and how we can help them leverage and harness the benefit of their differences, how to communicate better about their differences, and how to let their differences serve them instead of be the thing that they bump up against all the time. We have another couples retreat scheduled in February in Destin, Florida. Really excited about that. So those are the big things we have coming up. We're also often doing workshops. We have sexual health workshops going on this summer. We're going to do a kind of stacked series in the fall about betrayal and breakups in the lifestyle, and also in open relationships. The idea that, yes, you can be betrayed in an open relationship, weirdly enough. And so we've got some one-off workshops that we're doing this fall. So be on the lookout for those.
And where should people go to get more information about this?
Yeah. So expansiveconnection.com is our front-facing website. And then if you put /ENM for ethical non-monogamy, that's where you get to all the spicy stuff, all of our offerings. You can see an exhaustive list of all the podcasts we've been on. So there are hours and hours and hours of free education and wonderful conversations from all of my coaches and those of you that give us a microphone. So expansiveconnection.com /ENM. We're also on Instagram. And so you're welcome to find us at expansive.connection.coaching.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Catherine, for being on the show again. And I can't wait to hug you in real life soon.
All right. Have fun at that party for me. I can't wait to hear after the recap after.
I will. Okay, bye.
Bye.